Well, first of all, I suppose we should start with that thing that the Buddha's teachings, when we assess them, we look at the vast range of the Buddha's teachings, which he shared directly with his own followers and then through them with us, we can see there are these kind of two dominant patterns, two dominant categories, which we call in Sanskrit the Hinayana and the Mahayana. Hinayana meaning lesser vehicle or narrow vehicle, small vehicle, and Mahayana being great. What does that indicate? What's small and what's great? Well, what's small is motivation. What's great is motivation. In the sense that there's two ways to respond to the Buddha's teachings. One is to respond thinking of them as, that is the way I will become free from my own suffering. If I eliminate my delusions, I will experience peace. A deeper way, deeper because it emulates the Buddha himself, is to understand the purpose of practicing the path is not merely that. It's not merely to arrive at a state of personal peace, but to find in oneself the capacity to show others the way to that peace, that freedom from suffering, which is what Buddha himself did. Now, for many people, it may be that they move from one of these motivations to the other, starting with the smaller motivation as they become mature on the path. They gradually open up and realize this sense of responsibility, of altruistic responsibility for others, which is the core of the Mahayana, the great vehicle. So the Mahayana is practicing the Dharma out of the motivation we call bodhicitta, the wish to become a Buddha for others, a wish that arises through our compassionate sense of responsibility for them, that we must help them to find liberation from suffering. So the Mahayana, like the Hinayana, was taught by the Buddha in his discourses, or sutra as we call them in Sanskrit. But they differ in that they have this greater motivation, and also they differ in important respects in terms of the way reality is described. Reality is described in a much more profound way. Emptiness and non-self are described in great depth in the Mahayana, whereas they're somewhat kind of presented in a much less developed way in the Hinayana. So there's two important distinctions. But within the Mahayana, the great vehicle, we say, it follows various Tibetan and Himalayan traditions say, that the Buddha presented two ways in which that Mahayana aspiration to become a Buddha for others can be fulfilled. One is a common or ordinary way, which follows what he talked about in the sutras, in that he prescribed there that bodhisattvas, those who have the motivation to become Buddhas, should practice what we call the 6 perfections, or 6 transcendental virtues: giving, moral discipline, patience, effort, meditation, and wisdom. And by so doing, they gradually accumulate or gather qualities of merit, spiritual force, and wisdom, which will finally culminate in awakening, in achieving the state of a Buddha. But this is a gentle path, and takes a long time, because it's like the gradual accumulation of the causes, with thinking of Buddhahood as in a sense, exterior to us, something that we will attain in the future, when enough purification and enough accumulation of positive forces has been gathered. But we say that for some of his more gifted Mahayana disciples, Buddha prescribed a different way of accomplishing that goal of Buddhahood. Arising out of the same motivation, nevertheless, there may be some students who have greater capacities for powerful practice. And for them, in the Tantras, the esoteric teachings of the Tantras, Buddha taught this kind of, as we call it, uncommon, extraordinary Mahayana, or, to use that Sanskrit phrase, the Vajrayana, the indestructible vehicle. And what's the kind of core differential about this is that the Vajrayana, the Tantric teachings, are based upon the apprehension that the qualities of a Buddha, the qualities of enlightenment, as I've mentioned before, are actually naturally present in the mind of all beings. So that the goal, Buddhahood, which all of us Buddhists are striving for, is not something in a way which is radically other than where we are now. It's not something that's exterior to where we are now, so to speak, but can be found, if we have the right skillful methods, can be found here and now within our being. Even though we seem to be, right now, if we look at ourselves, beings clouded by emotional disturbances and ignorance, imprints and so on, actually the fundamental nature of our mind has never been corrupted. It is naturally pure. It never mixed with the disturbing emotions. Although they so to speak, accompany it, it never became base. It never became corrupted or impure. So if we can find a way for a path, which allows us to apprehend that presence of the Buddha within, so to speak, then Buddhahood is not distant. Buddhahood is actually naturally present, naturally to be discovered. So Vajrayana is a way in which, as we put it technically, the basis, the starting point, like me, an ordinary sentient being, the goal, Buddhahood, and the path to Buddhahood are one continuum. It's like we could think of, like, say, something like copper. If we have copper, out of copper we can make something like a bowl for drinking water for a dog, or we can make a beautiful Buddha image. The copper, however, has never changed. So similarly, the Vajrayana, there is no difference between ordinary sentient beings such as ourselves and the Buddha in the sense of the nature of our mind. It is one and the same, the union of emptiness and luminosity, or as it's called in the sutras, the Buddha nature. So that never has to change. All that has to be done is we have to realize it. And the methods of Vajrayana, initiations, sadhanas, and so on, and related techniques, they are the way of apprehending the Buddha within. Within this very body, speech, and mind, within this very set of disturbing emotions and ignorance and imprint, the fundamental purity of mind has never altered. Just as in my analogy, the copper never alters, whether it's fashioned into a bowl of water for the dog or a beautiful Buddha image. As it said in the Hivajra Tantra, all beings are already Buddhas, but they do not know this. When the obscurations are removed, there they are, fully Buddhas. And again it said, the only difference between a sentient being and a Buddha is a sentient being doesn't know the nature of his or her mind, and a Buddha does. But the nature is one and the same, the union of emptiness and luminosity. So Vajrayana is an extraordinary skillful means, as I mentioned, like through receiving initiations from our lamas, practicing the various sadhanas, the various meditation practices derived from those sadhanas, of apprehending the Buddha within. And that makes it the most rapid means to Buddhahood. So therefore we call it the uncommon or extraordinary Mahayana.